I invite you to join me today as I geek out into the world of the unknown with Amber Baker, who is known as the Malibu Medium. Amber is an Akashic Records reader, channel, and transformation guide. After a near death experience, her divine presence was awakened and she experienced a rebirth and resurrection. Having communicated with spirits and angels her whole life, she fully stepped into her purpose after this experience and never looked back. Shortly after her NDE, she started spontaneously channeling the Book of Life, which is also known as the Akashic Records, after 3 monks visited her, initiating her into the realm. She is a clear channel to a group of ascended masters and other enlightened beings and loves to share the wisdom of the guides so that others can utilize their infinite wisdom. She's extremely talented and gifted in this space and is highly sought after with a massive waitlist. I was really lucky to get this time with her today, so stay tuned and let's dive in together. All right, welcome to the show, Amber. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
You are known as the Malibu Medium, and you are so talented across a lot of fronts in the spiritual space. I would love to understand from you, what does it mean to be a medium or a psychic?
So, for me, my definition of being a medium is somebody who communicates with the unseen world. So, usually people would think that a medium is someone who, communicates with spirit. But for me, I communicate more with not just spirit, but with all maybe higher realms, ascended masters, angels, the divine realm. So a medium for me is just the fact that I can communicate with the invisible, with the unseen world.
Beautiful. And this work is something that you offer to so many amazing clients. I know you've got a huge wait list for readings and you've offered groups and things like that. How can a client leverage your work and meeting with you in their own lives in terms of like healing themselves or helping them? Like what do these services offer them?
So, if you're working with me on an individual basis, I'm channeling your Akashic Records. So, the Akashic Records is the library of our soul. Really, the way that I understand the Akashic Records is that it is the recorded imprint of source consciousness. So, source consciousness being the one consciousness that we all stem from. So, I open the Akashic Records and I access source consciousness, which is everything that has ever existed. Within source consciousness is the imprint of planet Earth and all other planets, all other timelines, all other realities. And then within that, I'm able to access our individual souls records. So the database that stores what has happened to them in the past, present, and future. So on an individual basis, I'm working with people by reading their Akashic records. And then my main passion is really to teach people how to access their own Akashic records and how to access the Akashic records. And so I teach people how to do that because then they can lead themselves in their own healing work and not just rely on someone like me or another practitioner to give them one reading. It's more beneficial, of course, if you can access this realm, your soul, this realm that really is higher consciousness on an everyday basis and receive wisdom and guidance. So the purpose, again, of reading the Akashic Records is to receive the wisdom of your soul, connect to really who your true essence is, who you are at that level of divinity, which is who we all really are, and then to not just receive the wisdom of who you are and higher consciousness, but to heal any limitations that you might be experiencing in this lifetime. And then to add to that, I know this is a lot, but the way that I see accessing the purpose, I should say, of accessing the Akashic Records is not just to heal as an individual soul, but to ascend into living in higher consciousness, which is really where we're at as a collective, which is co-creating this new earth, which is starting to have us all operate in a higher consciousness. So there's a lot of different purposes in working with our Akashic records. And I really like to teach people how to access this realm because it is entirely possible. And a lot of people think it's just for like the chosen, or like, you have to be a psychic medium, or you have to have intuitive abilities. It's not true. Although when I teach people how to channel the Akashic records, I do pull out their intuitive abilities, and I do teach them how to be a divine channel. So I basically teach people how to do what I do as a medium and start to communicate with the unseen world. So start to communicate with their higher self, start to communicate with the guides, the master teachers and angels that govern this realm. So it is a big journey to access the records. But yeah, I hope that answered your question. That was a big answer, but there's a lot of different facets to what I'm teaching and what I'm doing with people.
Yeah, it was beautifully said. Thank you. And definitely opens just a doorway to so many other amazing questions that I hope will help our listeners. So, to rewind just a little bit, how did you end up finding this space and diving into it in such a great way, and then also becoming so adept at it that you're now able to be an instructor for it? Like, this is obviously a great passion of yours, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about your journey into it.
Yeah, so I will have to say that I was born a medium. I know that some people study to be a medium, but I did have that natural ability. So I had this kind of, maybe a more unusual childhood where angels would visit me, and spirits would be visiting me, and so I was communicating naturally since I was a child, in that way. But about 6 years ago, I had a near-death experience, and that's what took me to work in the Akashic Records. So in that experience, that's a long story, but I was experiencing asthma. I actually had two near-death experiences. My first one, I was a newborn and I got double pneumonia and I almost died. And ever since then, I have asthma. And so I had a really difficult bout with asthma that I was not able to get under control. And I was struggling to breathe, and I was going in and out of the hospital, and I was at home and I had my own breathing machine. And one night I just couldn't breathe anymore, and I was struggling to catch my breath. And so I prayed to my grandmother in spirit, and she actually walked into my room in spirit and started to lay her hands over me. And all of a sudden, there was Archangel Michael and Mother Mary. And it was just a knowing, and I could feel and see them energetically. And as they were there, kind of laying their hands over me, I left my body and I journeyed into the afterlife, or I don't know how to explain it. It was another dimension, and I went through the tunnel of light, and Archangel Michael really poured into me wisdom that is what I pull from or work with now in my life. So he taught me that we are not defined by our thoughts and feelings. He not only taught me who I really was as a divine being, but he brought me to source. And so I became one with source at one part in my journey during this near-death experience. And in that experience, I had a complete divine presence activation as my consciousness merged with the one consciousness that we stem from. And so when they told me that I was a healer and that I was going to write books, and that my mission, my soul's mission, was to help other people activate their own divine presence. And in my life, I was going through a lot of struggles at that time, and I was not feeling my divine presence. And so there was a lot of life review in that experience that they showed me, that was pointing to really teach me how I was not, again, my thoughts, I was not the struggles that I was going through. I was not any of those things, and that I was this infinite presence and omnipotent and unlimited in possibility and potential. And of course, not just me, it was everyone is this power. And so I went back into my body, and before they told me that I was going to, come back to earth and live and be this healer, they told me that the first night they were coming to me was a reckoning, and they were going to come to me a second night, and that was going to be an awakening, and the third night they were going to come to me, and that was going to be a rebirth. And so I went back into my body, and I completely woke up into being a different person. I had this completely new way of seeing the world and feeling and being in my body, which was seen through the lens of this infinite, the lens of God, really, the lens of source, having this divine presence activation. And so they did come to me for two more nights. And long story short, there was a couple months after that I had a experience at the astral level where I woke up in my dream looking at myself and viewing my body. And I saw three monks surrounding me in my bed, and they, were bald with like the orange cloaks, and they were talking amongst themselves, and I still don't know what they were saying, but they, at some point, and I was viewing this like a movie from above, they came up to my head, and one of them whispered in my ear, "Pour oil over your forehead in the morning. This is an initiation." And so that really, that was a wild experience. I'm like, I had the near death experience, I had the divine presence activation, but this, I was just floored. I couldn't believe that this had happened, and I didn't know what they meant. So then some months later, I had this calling to open the Akashic Records, and I didn't even know what the Akashic Records was, but I realize now this was all part of this divine plan that they had for me. And so I looked up a prayer online, and I opened the Akashic Records, and I started to spontaneous channel the book of life. And I had these monks, these guides that came to me as soon as I opened the records, and they actually came into my body and took over my voice and started to speak like as a male voice through in an accent, and they started to literally channel through me this wisdom, and they told me, "We are going to channel through you the book of life." And so this information that I started to channel is a book that I'm writing, and it's going to be shared with the world because it's wisdom, not that I know, that they are sharing with me for humanity, to help all of us ascend, to help all of us start to really unravel these limitations that we wear every day and that we think we are. And so there's a lot of wisdom that they have spoken through me. And that was my introduction to the Akashic Records. I did not know that the Book of Life was the Akashic Records, but as I went on channeling every day, I would connect with them and really kind of take the order, because it was really, in a way, they really just said, "Okay, this is what's happening." And I just was going along, on this ride. So it was definitely a profound experience to connect with the records in that way first. But then shortly after, I started to kind of share my experiences, and people would just start coming to me for readings. And then that's really from there, that's how it's built. I just started to do readings for people and teach, not from the lens of learning from a teacher, but I've learned directly from these masters that I have been channeling with, and they have taught me everything about how to connect to the records, and shared with me the wisdom that they want, like I said, humanity to have today.
What an incredible experience. Wow. I'm so excited to read your book too. I can't wait for that to come out. So sending you a lot of positive energy to get that finished.
I know, I
Um,
need to get that finished.
yeah.
Yep.
Uh, there's a lot of buzz for the listeners right now. If you guys have paid attention at all to the spiritual space, I mean, you can go on any YouTube channel with any podcast that talks at all anything to do with spirituality or the psychic space, etc. Everyone is talking right now about this massive global shift, how the world is changing and the timeline is changing. I'm probably going to butcher this, so bear with me because I'm so new to this space, but the dimension is shifting. Like, tell me a little bit about what's going on from your perspective. Like, what's happening?
Well, really, what I've learned from the guides is that we are creating a new earth. And what that really is a new level of consciousness that we are all starting to be asked to operate in. And so the levels of consciousness are directly correlated with dimensions. So we all know that there's kind of maybe globally like decided upon that there's 12 dimensions. I'm sure there's many more than that. But basically the level of consciousness, like I said, that we exist in allows us to then operate in the correlating dimensions that coincide with that level of consciousness. So as humans, we kind of are in this physical dimension very much, and we're in that the 4D dimension, which is the dimension of duality. But what the new earth is the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension is just unity consciousness. So it's the actual experience of merging the experience of duality, of seeing things in opposition and starting to see maybe shadow and light and opposition in harmony. And so unity consciousness, to in order to experience that, which really is a state of wholeness, we all are going through this deeply healing journey, because what we have to do is really deal with the shadow side of maybe identifying with ourselves in shadow, and then bring that to kind of the surface and heal that. So there's this rapid healing going on at the same time we as a collective are moving into unity consciousness. Some people are having quantum leaps into this unity consciousness, but a lot of us are going through this healing journey again of kind of walking through what my guides call this ring of fire, kind of to meet ourselves at that divine presence. We're facing our insecurities and we're facing our shadow. And so, yeah, so the new earth is really just an overlay of this existing planet in a new level of consciousness.
So deep and so interesting. And again, for the listeners, just take some time and research this even more, because it's pretty fascinating, and it's also really interesting too from like a healing perspective. You know, if you have had historically issues, like now is such a great time to lean in and do the work to heal yourself. You're just so supported by basically everything right now, that all the
Yeah.
energies are aligning to do the healing work. So beautifully said. You are someone who hosts workshops, trainings. I think you do some one-on-one stuff, just based on the website that you have. What are the classes that you teach, and how do you help people tap into becoming their own developed psychics, mediums, accessing the Akashic Records, et cetera? Tell us a little bit more about that and how that works out.
So I teach people how to read their own Akashic Records. Um, Again, by doing that, you have to learn how to become a divine channel, and you really have to learn how to expand your consciousness. So there's a lot of steps, and there's a journey again that goes along with that, because so much of the time when if we are operating with lower consciousness, or if we're operating really being defined by our thoughts or circumstances or shadow, that means that we're operating in a very 3D, 4D level of consciousness. And when we access the Akashic Records, in order to receive the wisdom, we have to be able to hold space in a more expanded state of awareness and really get past our own blocks and our own way of normally maybe operating from that other place. And when I say lower level of consciousness, I hope that the listeners don't take this as a judgment, because there really is no hierarchy in, the language of dimensions. It's just more about more. It's more about an expansion of consciousness. So I teach people how to expand their consciousness and how to be a divine channel, and the tools that they need to start to ask the questions to their own soul, ask the questions to these guides that govern the Akashic Records, and then how to receive the wisdom. The other thing is that the records is always going to teach you how to heal limitations. So you have to learn how to identify where in your life you're struggling. And it's also, the records is also about teaching you um, how to ultimately live in a new state of alignment with your higher self. So it's a healing modality, and a lot of it is about co-creating a new reality. So I look at the journey of reading your records or the records as a whole as a journey of healing, but a journey of really starting to live this new earth consciousness and live as in a whole new level like of being. And so what that does is it awakens in people living their purpose, but really living in purpose. It awakens a lot of souls' missions, and it awakens this power. It awakens in the people that I work with and teach a sense of their own power. And by doing that, it ignites like choices. It ignites them to take action and do things in a different way. It changes everything about who they are. And then I always say that the approach to how you look at your healing journey matters. The approach to how you look at your soul's evolution journey matters, because what happens is when you start to wake up higher consciousness and read your records, it's not that you then don't experience struggle. It's not that you maybe don't have issues or things that you would like to heal. It's that the way you look at it changes. So you no longer get stuck in the cycle of being a victim to those struggles. So you look at it from this empowered point of view, and it becomes, I don't know if I can say the word exciting, but empowering. It becomes empowering to lead yourself through the journey of really healing any limitation that you have in your life over and over and over again. So again, it's not that you all of a sudden don't have any struggles, but you know how to lead yourself through healing. And the empowering thing about that is, I don't know about you, but like for me, anytime I'm living my light and stepping into my light and taking action in my higher purpose, I'm actually bringing my insecurities to the surface more, because I'm challenging the ego, I'm challenging my shadow. So it's this tool that I believe is really needed, because we have to learn how to really like reprogram the way that we've been living, because every time we show up in our light and show up in purpose, a lot of times that will bring up a lot of conditioning that we've experienced in our life. So we need that support while we're learning, kind of like this, like a baby learning how to be this new way. So we're kind of like all, leaning towards our light and leaning towards living in purpose and power, but we still have a lot of deconditioning to do as a collective. So the records is there as a supportive tool.
Beautiful. Wow. Just on a practical level, in layman's terms, if you will, I'll just share a little bit of kind of how I'm receiving this and how I'm right now going through my own journey, and how for listeners that this is so applicable to your own lives. Very publicly on my podcast, I've shared in many episodes, my own personal mental health journey that I've been going through, where, I had struggled, military childhood traumas, et cetera, and just suffered with it for most of my life. I'm in my 30s right now, and I'd really had such a hard time, crippling anxiety, terrible depression, wanted to end my life. I spent so much time around the wrong crowd, drinking alcohol, partying, just trapped in negative self thinking, victimhood, angry all the time, right? And I got to a point where I just really couldn't get any lower. And I had this beautiful awakening supported by, at the time, plant medicine, but it's just blossomed into so much more, where now I'm just really leaning in and tapping into spirituality and mindset work, meditation practice, mindfulness, breath work, just on this path of continuing to go down all of these other alternative healing modalities. And what I found is the most beautiful healing by focusing inward and really trying to connect with, to what you alluded to, that higher purpose, that light, leaning into the shadows and turning them into what I in my own meditation I call it, turning the shadows into love and light, and not pushing them into the closet anymore and being upset with myself for having these shadows, but instead embracing them, loving them, figuring out why they're there, and doing the work. And through that practice, I found true healing. And so I just find it so beautiful how you've articulated some of the work that you do and how freeing it can be for those that are willing to put in the time and effort, but also that 360-degree holistic view of someone's life. If they're looking at what are the things that are keeping them trapped in that old behavior, that old life, that old, those old patterns that aren't serving them, when you start chipping away at those things and you take it seriously, I quit drinking alcohol. I cut caffeine because that was exasperating my anxiety. I got a new friend group. I started going to places that were healing and supportive, developing a new community for myself instead of locking myself into that old thing or that old lifestyle and thinking that I'm just a victim, right? So much of what you're talking about right now, it's like when you remove the woo-woo, because a lot of this is, to some people may think, oh my gosh, this is woo-woo. Well, look, maybe the other stuff is woo-woo. Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe,
this is the most natural. The thing is like this is who we are. The woo woo, I don't even understand that word. To me, like this is normal. This, we were born divine. We are divine, and channeling with spirit, channeling our higher self. This is natural. It's
yeah,
just that we've been taught to be a different way. So it's really more about unraveling what's natural and like getting rid of the bullshit, right? Getting
yes.
rid of living trapped. And I resonate a lot with what you're saying. I know that many people go through that dark night of the soul. They meet the edge of their human limitations, and when you are faced with like that edge, when you no longer you're in a state of surrender, right?
Mm.
You said that you kind of just you couldn't do it anymore, and I was in that state before my NDE. I was also drinking, I was smoking. I hope my parents aren't, I mean, I'm sure
Sorry,
my
mom and
parents will
dad.
listen to this, or my kids, but I was really feeling trapped by this cycle of my internal dialogue. And that was a huge part of the message with Archangel Michael. Just if you could take away one thing, to understand that we're not defined by our thoughts and feelings is liberation,
Mm-hmm.
right, in the first place, because we are the awareness behind our thoughts and feelings. So if you can start to question what you're thinking and ask yourself if it's true, it's not about, not honoring what you're thinking or feeling, but it's about asking if it's true and starting to, that's the expansion of consciousness, when you can say, well, what else could be true and who am I really? So the awareness behind your thoughts and feelings, that the part of you that's observing what you're experiencing and seeing if it's working for you, seeing if that is the most supportive experience for yourself. And then if it's not, starting to literally by asking or by directing your life, like that's what the co-creation part is saying, okay, I'm not loving what I'm experiencing. So what do I want? What do I desire? And that's like the fun part, because that's when you're starting to play with your higher consciousness and really taking like the reins of your life and creating. Because when we are in that cycle of like regurgitating negative thoughts, we're not co-creating, we're reacting.
Mm.
We're really kind of living in that matrix, right, of conditioning. So getting out of that is awakening your higher self, awakening your divine presence. It's starting to just look at your experiences and respond to them and choose a different path forward.
As we talk about intuition, I know that some people, obviously, much like yourself, have a stronger intuition than others naturally. How can people start to develop their intuition where, as you just mentioned, like when they start considering things they want versus what they don't want, like what in themselves can they recognize to where they can start kind of following that path of the higher self and start course correcting maybe where they've gone wrong for many years or their whole lives to start getting on the right track and finding that healing and purpose.
So, the first thing that I would say, and something that I do with myself, is if there's too much noise, if you're busy all the time, or if you are always listening to something, or if you're, yeah, busy and listening to things all the time, like kind of having, you know, noise from media, noise from other people, if you don't have time alone for reflection, if you have to create that, because the voice of your intuition is, it takes that space. So just creating space in solitude, it can be in nature and kind of talking to yourself, starting to ask questions. That would be a huge thing to ask, because honestly, when you ask, you receive. And you might not hear the answer right away from your higher self, but I promise you, when you ask, sometimes you'll receive a message in a podcast, or you'll receive a message. Sometimes you will receive kind of like a download, or sometimes it will just be a sign or a symbol. But asking would be big, creating space so that you can start to listen to your thoughts behind your thoughts, right? Because remember, you're the awareness behind your thoughts. So the more you can observe what you're thinking and feeling and start to ask what else is true, that's where you're going to access your intuition. And I think that um, we we can kind of cover up our intuition. When I was younger, I had a lot of knowings, like this kind of knowing about certain relationships or paths that I was taking, and I just didn't listen to it. You know, sometimes our intuition speaks in dreams. And so it's kind of, we have to just learn how to listen, and we have to learn how to ask.
When let's say that and I'm just going to use like a practical example here. Let's say that you meet someone
Mhm.
and they give you a bad vibe. Is
Yeah.
that intuition?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So, because, you know, we're all energy, right? You're picking up on their energy. They can look amazing, they can be saying all the best things, but if what you're reading is their energy, and that's their truth. Their
Mhm.
energy is their truth, right? So, for sure, that is your intuition speaking.
And then another question that I know a lot of the audience and folks I've talked to about, just when you start tapping into, either channeling or connecting with higher self, et cetera, and they're asking questions, and let's say they said it out loud, like, hey, should I take this job or this job? And they hear a response, but that response is in their own voice. Is that their higher self? Is that guidance? Is that their spirit guides? Like, what is that? Because I know I know the answer here, but I'm just curious your take on how you would spin that to help encourage people to start trusting themselves.
So the thing about your own voice, you're speaking about your internal dialogue, right? So
Yeah.
what's tricky is that when I'm channeling, it's a telepathic thought transfer. So it's dropped into my consciousness, right? So that would be, it's really going to be filtered and dropped into my own voice, right? Or my own consciousness. Um, I think that before you kind of decipher, like, okay, this is my intuition, or this is, or not, I would start to really start to get to know the difference between like the chatter like that you have, like that constant kind of mind chatter. It's going to be more reactionary, it's going to be more fear based, it's going to feel more heavy, right? And then start to listen and pay attention to the other experiences that you might have that might feel like a drop of thought. So it's going to feel like it's coming still from yourself, right? Because it's channeled through you. But I would then say, okay, ask yourself, how does it feel? Does it feel like it lands in your heart in neutrality? does it feel kind of expansive and light? And does it feel kind of maybe high frequency, like you want to kind of jump up and listen, so you have to learn how to decipher instead of just say, okay, this is the one way. And it has to be individual for you. You have to have that knowing within your own self, like that says, yeah, no, I know the difference. And then the other thing I will say is that there is no wrong step that we can take in our life. If you listen to something that you thought was your intuition and then it doesn't feel right, then okay, then maybe that's the lesson. And now you know the difference. There's no wrong turn, but it might just be a longer path to get to where you're meant to go. And there might be a lesson involved. The truth is we can't be perfect and be always just perfectly listening to our intuition. Even me, who feels, has had all these experiences and who channels, of course, sometimes I get it wrong where I'm like, oh yeah, actually that was not really like what I want to do. And so that's okay. Just pivot. And it's part of the journey of living. And we are human. We
Mm.
are still human. We're just expanding in consciousness.
Yeah, I've done so much work on this over the last few months, just getting to a place of trust, because trust was one of my shadows. Trust was one of
Mm.
the things that I really struggled with the most, with other people, with myself. It was something that I really had to do a lot of work on to. Because I was living in a place of survival and fight or flight for so long that I didn't trust anyone, and I didn't even trust myself. And so lately, as I've been going through that shadow work and really starting to heal it, now when I ask a question, just in general, like a life path question, like should I go this way or that way? Should I work with this person or not? Should I reach out to this person? Whatever it is, I've really started to pause and, even just meditating 15 minutes. And to your very valid point, like how does it make me feel? Where does it hit? What is my first gut intuition? Like really trusting my gut. And I found that doing that work on everything. Should I be drinking alcohol? Well, no, my gut is automatically telling me no, and listening to myself. Should I be drinking coffee? And I'm just giving you like, elementary examples, but that's the stuff that adds up. Those are the death by a thousand paper cut things, where it's like, if I'm just starting to really trust myself, I'm finding that I actually know the answer.
Yeah.
And when I'm following that intuition, it's not wrong. It's never wrong. It's always serving me in the higher good, to just trust myself, and to trust that, I'll know by being next to someone or picking up on the vibe, if you will. I know that's a big buzzword, but it's so true. That I'm going to be led down the right path. So it is exercise. It is work.
Yeah,
It is something.
it's like a practice, right? And
Yeah.
every time you listen, you are building trust with yourself. And I'll have to say that the other thing is, the more you're in touch with your intuition, what that really means is you're in touch with your true essence, your higher self. And then the intuitive part is going to be that what it's going to kind of ask of you is usually to follow your calling.
Mm.
And when you follow your calling, the thing that sometimes people can get confused about is that that can feel scary, because your calling will be like this path of service and it's going to ask you to show up. And that's when a lot of times we don't listen, because we're afraid. We're afraid of what it's asking us to do. And so like for me, a lot of times, every time I'm like teaching a class or showing up in a bigger way, I've had to go through this whole side journey of healing insecurities and things. But at the same time, I know that my intuitive part that's telling me, okay, go this path, do this. It's the right path, but it's more expansive. So you're gonna, the more people, and it's not a bad thing. It's just a journey, it's a journey. So your intuition is always going to be guiding you towards, your highest path, but your highest path is going to be challenging sometimes, because it's going to ask you to show up in love and light, like you said, but to show up in power. And so for me, that's where I'm at right now, where it's like I'm kind of stepping into, or really letting go of identities, like, oh, I used to think I was like this. And it's like, the identities start to kind of die. You start to like get into these new versions of who you really are that you have to get to know and embody, you know?
You talked earlier in our conversation about helping your clients to clear blockages that are preventing them from, being fully able to access themselves and their own energy and things like that. Tell me a little bit more about that. What does that mean, and how do you go about helping them clear those energies?
So when I do a session or if I'm teaching people how to read their own records, what you're doing in a reading is you're actually bringing the struggle to the Akashic records. So you start with the struggle. So we're going deep into the shadow work, right? So you want to, because the purpose, remember, of reading your records is to heal any limitation that's holding you back, and then to step into and embody your divine presence. So you basically are taking yourself through a journey of going from living in a state of limitation to a state of wholeness and unlimited presence, potential, possibility. So you start with the block. So if this would be done on an individual basis, you're going to start to have to learn how to get outside of being defined by your block and start to identify it. So you're starting to already be the observer in your life and self-initiate and lead that process just by becoming aware of where am I blocked. So it's like there's no bullshit anymore. You can't fool yourself when you start doing this work, because you have to identify where you're playing small in life and where you're holding yourself back. And sometimes that in itself is just a big process. So you start with describing to your Akashic guides what you're experiencing. It doesn't have to be, in fact, it shouldn't be just like a question. It's more just a conversation where you're like, okay, just like you would have with a friend, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, I'm experiencing this, and this is what I think the block is. And then what happens is the Akashic guides take you on this journey of shifting your perspective and seeing yourself in a new light in that circumstance. And then by seeing yourself in that new light, what I mean by that is seeing your divinity, and then they show you who you really are in your divinity, and then they show you the path forward. What is your path forward? What is your highest path? What's your highest potential? What are the choices that you can make? And then what do those choices look like in your life? What will that ignite in your life? So it's always about starting with the block, and then they tell you, or they're channeling to you, why do you have that block? What is it related to? Is it related to a past life? Is it related to a limited mindset or thinking? Is it related to an ancestral lineage issue? So there's the root cause of that block is tied to something. So just by them teaching you and clarifying, and showing you why you have that block, that's one step. And then the next step is to, okay, how do you heal? How do you move forward? And how you move forward is by understanding and having compassion and letting it go. But you just don't go from point A to point B. Like in the Western world, it's like, you might say, okay, I have this problem, and then someone might say, okay, just think like this. But to get to this new way of thinking, a lot of times you have a lot of resistance, you have a lot of pain and trauma and suffering. So the guides are taking you through shifting your consciousness, shifting your perspective, and it's done individually for your soul based on what the block is and based on what exactly you need to know in order to make those shifts in a new way of thinking, in a new perspective, and shifting into a new perspective. So that's kind of the first step, is the understanding, the letting go. And then the exciting part is like the co-creation forward. Okay, so once you see yourself in that new light, then what? Now what? And that's when the guides will give you a lot of guidance around the expansion of who you are, and they'll show you, like I said, the path forward. And that part is, it can be practical steps forward. You get to ask questions every step of the way because you're just channeling with them. So you're having this conversation. So it's never, I don't teach people exactly what questions to ask. I teach people how to ask questions so that they're hand tailored to you and to your journey. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. I mean, and especially, as we dial back of the purpose of this conversation, we're looking to explore other healing modalities and ways to help people heal themselves at the soul level so they can move forward. Because a lot of these, a lot of the blocks that people experience, and I know the same is true for me, they're ancestral. They've been there a long time. Like, my own parents struggled deeply with depression, and obviously that fed into me, and it's like it's an ongoing cycle. And so how beautiful that we can explore other healing modalities that are not traditional Western medicine, where we're able to clear some of those things and break the cycle. So this is super, super empowering work here. You talked oh, go ahead.
I will just say really quick because when you heal something, let's say you individually heal something, and this is done in or out of the records, you've already healed a cycle of depression yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's just say, like in the records, you heal something on an individual basis for your soul. That's actually impacting your community, your family. So when you heal something within another. It
Mm.
actually, because we're all connected, it's really amazing that it really actually affects the people, your relationships. It changes everything. And so the work that you do in your records, it's not just going to be seen and felt and have that impact on that individual basis. It's for the collective that we're doing those things. And there is a lot of collective wounds, right, that we experience. And so it's the more that we do this work, we are healing on a larger scale.
Wow. And if that doesn't motivate you to put the effort and energy into healing yourself for the listeners at home, I don't know what will. When you have the power to help heal others around you as well, it's truly beautiful work. You talked in just recently about like past lives.
Yeah.
Do you have insight for us, especially for those of us that are newer to this space? What is the purpose from your perspective of why we keep coming back and why we have multiple lives? Like, what is the overarching goal of reincarnation or continued visitations to the having a life experience?
So the thing is that we're just a continuation within consciousness of experience. And so, yeah, it's a past life and the human way for us to understand it. But really, our soul is everlasting. So we will never stop experiencing ourself within consciousness. And so when you start to look at your life in that way, that it's never just this one life, and that you not only are experiencing past lives, but you could be experiencing future lives, and you can experience also parallel realities. So when you start to look at it from that larger scale, you start to open yourself up to kind of seeing this life not in a trivial manner, but really seeing the expansiveness of who you are. And the other thing is that there is, though, a purpose of having this individual human life kind of not, I don't know if I want to say a veil, but we are supposed to focus on the lessons and who we are, the expression that our soul has chosen to take on in this individual life, because that's where the work is done. So meaning every time, if we came into this world knowing everything about who we are, it could create some sort of pandemonium within our own, consciousness. So there is a purpose, I guess I should say, with kind of having a narrow perspective of like, this is my identity, this is who I am, and this is my lifetime, because in that focus, it gives us the attention to do the work at hand and to heal maybe the relationship, or to wake up our higher purpose. And so every time you're doing something that is healing and that ignites growth in this lifetime, that's affecting and impacting who you are as a soul in all other lifetimes. Okay, so that's true. But the other truth is that you could have some sort of trauma, right? That's unresolved that could be affecting this lifetime. But you will only receive the understanding, or you'll only get who you were in another lifetime, I should say, if it is relevant to this lifetime. So the way the Akashic Records works is if you just go in like, what were my lifetimes? Like, was I a queen? Was I this? Like, there has to be purpose for them to give you the understanding of who you were in another lifetime. It has to be something that is going to maybe ignite power, or maybe wake up an ability or passion that you have. It's always going to be related to this lifetime for you to receive the wisdom of another lifetime, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Also, I'm like, oh, she said queen. That's very much been a theme over the last few months for
And
me. Oh
and
my
it's
goodness.
and it's okay to be like, oh, was I a queen? And it's not that they're not going to like give you insight to that, but it is a sacred act or practice of reading the records, and so it is governed by the
Mm,
Akashic guides, and sometimes you just won't get information if it's not in
yeah.
your highest potential, or if it's, you know. So I think the most powerful readings that I do that get access to a past life is because that past life is, again, relative to their growth in this lifetime.
When I went through Bufo 5-MeO DMT at the military veteran healing retreat I went to, I had this incredible download while going through it. I have a video of it. It's really powerful, of being shown life after life after life of me in war, in battle,
Mm.
and that I was a warrior queen. And I came out of that session, it's all on video, where I was like, I had this question of like, well, if we have past lives, how come we can't just remember them? And when I came out of that session, I was like, that's why I didn't want to remember that. It was
Yeah.
horrible. It was awful. It was brutal. It was violent. And I'm so unthankful that I just got shown the violence all over again. And I actually had 2 sessions of it back to back. This was after the first session, and I was supposed to immediately following go into another Bufo session, and I had just like a couple minutes where I was just in tears, sobbing, like, please don't make me go through that again. And
Yeah.
so I was like, now I know why they don't show it to us unless it's as you just alluded to, like, unless there's a reason that we get shown
Mhm.
that. So
Yeah.
powerful, powerful, beautiful work. Thank you so much. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening right now that would love to connect with you. Where can people find you?
So you can check me out on my website. It's the malibumedium.com, or I like to show up on Instagram, which is also Malibu Medium. Yeah.
Amazing. And I'll hyperlink everything below for everybody so they can come and follow you and connect with you, and hopefully join one of your amazing classes that you offer, so they can tap into their own Akashic records and do some deep spiritual soul level healing. Thank you, Amber, for coming on the show. We're so grateful to have you today. And for all of our listeners at home, thanks for listening in.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, take a moment to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below, and share it with someone you love. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.